Water is the most important element of life, and we cannot live without it. Water is an element that can be used in any possible way, or in other words, multipurpose. As we all know that water is made up of two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom, which forms the compound H2O. This element leads us to what we call the water cycle. What is water cycle? Water cycle is a biogeochemical cycle that shows the movement of the water in the atmosphere and the planet system itself in our planet Earth. How does the water cycle work? It starts off with evaporation wherein water evaporates into the air and it creates water vapor. Then it converts into clouds through the process of condensation. Next is precipitation. Precipitation is a process that water from the cloud is poured out by means of either rain or snow. The water poured out on the land can be done in through different processes such as runoff, infiltration, percolation, and groundwater collection. These groundwater was now intake by the plants and also transpired by the plants as well.
Next, we will report the anthropogenic stress in water. I am Angel Monique Sabile Escoreal, and here, water supply issues are frequently caused by human activity, and in this context, the most significant activities are those related in agriculture, industry, landfills, sewage, and anything else that can result in increased turbidity. There are two categories of anthropogenic stress: non-point sources, where the impact is spread out over a wide region, such in logging or agriculture, and point sources like factories, landfills, or mines, where the impact is limited to a single location. Agriculture poses by far of the most significant hazard to the quality of the water. It is practiced all across the world and uses more land than all other uses put together. Currently, cultivated land outnumbers wooded land by 30%. Fertilizers high in nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are widely used in fields throughout the world. These nutrients aid in the growth of the crops, but if more fertilizer is used than actual necessary, the extra will eventually find its way into the environment. Fertilizer nitrogen has the potential to volatilize and fall as rain somewhere else. Fields may release nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium into surface water bodies. They may also permeate deep into the soil, moving away from the plant roots where they mix with the groundwater. A surface water body may receive the algae, which can pose serious issues for aquatic life, human water supplies, and anyone who enjoys being in or near the water.
The world's hydrosphere and its floodplains were central to the development of civilization and are now home to 8 billion people. However, a number of anthropogenic stressors, including large-scale damming, hydrological change, pollution, and sediment mining, challenge their future. The extent of such change is so great that large-scale and potentially irreparable transformations may ensue in periods of years to decades. Anthropogenic stress is a natural occurrence on Earth to maintain the equilibrium of ever-changing ecosystems. But with ever-increasing human activities, the equilibrium is disturbed. Applying Le Chatelier's principle, the position of equilibrium is disturbed due to changing the conditions contributed by human activities. At the moment, the position of equilibrium shifts to counteract the change and re-establish an equilibrium.
All bodies of water have an ecosystem that has a natural prey-predator relationship to keep every population living in their ecosystem balanced. Introducing species in an ecosystem may positively or negatively affect the species living in that ecosystem, may it be aerial, terrestrial, or aquatic. For the purpose of this video, we will only be tackling the invasive species that affect the natural bodies of water. People may assume that invasive species can only be a type of fauna, but this can also be a type of flora. The common water hyacinth is an introduced species of flora due to its beauty, but as this type of flora become common, it has become a pest in numerous parts of the world. It disrupts the growth of other native species by blocking the sunlight for some smaller flora that is native to that body of water. It also disrupts local livelihood by disabling them to work on the body of water that flora is present.
Next are two examples of invasive species that are found in salt water. First is a sea lamprey. Among the most primitive of all vertebrate species, the sea lamprey is a parasitic fish native to the northern and western Atlantic Ocean. Unlike bony fishes like trout or cod, lampreys lack scales, fins, and gill covers. Like sharks, their skeletons are made of cartilage. They breathe through a distinctive row of 7 pairs of tiny gill openings located behind their mouths and eyes. Sea lampreys attach to a host fish, rasp and puncture its skin, and drain its body fluids, often killing the host fish. High wounding rates indicated that sea lampreys were having a significant impact and were preventing the restoration of native fish species. Studies found that a single sea lamprey can kill 40 or more pounds of fish during its adult life. Fish that survive a sea lamprey attack expend more energy on healing than on producing eggs and mating, causing declines in fish populations. Due to the severity of the impacts that sea lamprey have on the ecosystem, it has been determined that the sea lamprey populations should be controlled. Next is the lionfish. Lionfish, also called turkeyfish or firefish, are any of several species of showy Indo-Pacific fishes of the scorpionfish family. Lionfish are noted for their venomous fin spines, which are capable of producing painful, though rarely fatal, puncture wounds. Adult lionfish are primarily fish eaters and have very few predators outside of their home range. Researchers have discovered that a single lionfish residing on a coral reef can reduce recruitment of native reef fish by 79%. Lionfish feed on prey normally consumed by snappers, groupers, and other commercially important native species. This means their presence could negatively affect the well-being of valuable commercial and recreational fisheries. As lionfish populations grow, they put additional stress on coral reefs. For example, lionfish eat herbivores, and herbivores eat algae from coral reefs. Without herbivores, algal growth goes unchecked, which can be detrimental to the health of coral reefs. And those are some examples and facts of the invasive species that are found in the freshwater and saltwater environment and how they can affect the ecosystem.
Epigenetics. Epigenetics literally means above or on top of genetics. It refers to the external modification to DNA that turns genes on or off. There's a change in the phenotype or the expressed physical traits of the organism without changing the genotype or the organism's genetic makeup. This means that the genetic sequence is still the same, but the modification affects how the cells read or interpret the genes. An example of this is when one parent is light-skinned and the other parent is dark-skinned. Even if the offspring comes out dark-skinned, this doesn't mean that it doesn't have the light skin genes. It is still in its genetic makeup, however, its cells just read the dark skin gene, which caused the offspring to express that trait. Allele is one of two or more DNA sequences occurring at a particular gene locus. Alleles can either be dominant or recessive. For example, say the dominant allele is purple and the recessive allele is white. The plant could either be homozygous, meaning it has both dominant or both recessive alleles, or heterozygous, where both alleles are present. So, a purple plant could either be homozygous, where it has both purple alleles, making it purple, or it can be heterozygous, where it has both purple and white alleles, but purple being the dominant allele, the flower still turns out purple. And of course, if the flower has both white alleles, it is homozygous, but it is white since it has both white alleles.
Every body's cell contains the same genes. The functional and structural distinctions between different cell types are caused by gene expression patterns, which result in various sets of proteins. Almost all cell types express housekeeping genes, whereas regulated genes could or could not be produced at any particular time or in any particular cell type. Next, how is DNA packaged? Let us talk about chromatin. Chromatin is what makes up the eukaryotic chromosome, which consists of DNA, histones, and other proteins. And moving on to histones, the most fundamental type of DNA packaging, nucleosomes, are created when the histones attach to the DNA and to one another. Next, as for the epigenetic modification, there are two main types. First is the DNA methylation, and the second is the histone modification. Sir Gabriel will tackle these two types.
DNA methylation. Enzymes in DNA methylation add the methyl group CH3 to cytosine base in the DNA. In promoter regions, methylated cytosine silence DNA transcription. DNA methylation is at the root of event, like X chromosome, inactivation and genomic imprinting. Let's talk about histone code. The histone code hypothesis states that the post-translational modifications to histone proteins greatly influence DNA transcription, controlling gene expression through these mechanisms. Allows a person's phenotype to change without changing their underlying genetic makeup. Regulation of transcription in eukaryotes. First is short-term regulation, entails rapidly turning gene sets on or off. In response to environmental or physiological changes, environmental conditions in a cell or organism. In multicellular eukaryotes, long-term gene regulations entails the regulatory events that an organism needs to develop and differentiate.
Invasive species are capable of causing extinctions of native plants and animals, reducing biodiversity, competing with native organisms for limited resources, and altering habitats. This can result in huge economic impacts and fundamental disruptions of coastal and Great Lakes ecosystems. But on the other hand, invasive species also provide challenges to management as well as an opportunity to explore basic ecological questions like what are the main impacts of invasive species and how do these impacts change ecosystem goods and services. Once again, we are Group 1. Thank you so much for listening.